Welcome aboard the Bedtime Express, your nightly journey into peaceful sleep and beautiful dreams. I'm your conductor for tonight's gentle voyage through the ancient world of Greek mythology. Tonight, we'll be traveling together through the timeless story of how our universe came to be, from the very first stirrings of creation to the birth of the cosmos we know today. You'll hear about the primordial beings who emerged from chaos, the mighty titans who shaped the early world, and the divine family whose love and wisdom brought harmony to all existence. Before you enjoy your ride on the Bedtime Express, please give us a like and subscribe to join our community of peaceful dreamers. Share in the comments what bedtime stories bring you the most comfort. We love hearing from our passengers. Now, settle into your most comfortable position, close your eyes, and let your breathing become slow and deep. Allow the gentle rhythm of the story to carry away the worries of the day. Your journey into peaceful sleep begins now. All aboard the Bedtime Express. Next stop, sweet dreams. The birth of the world, from chaos to cosmos. Long, long ago, before there were stars to twinkle in the night sky, before there were mountains to touch the clouds, before there were oceans to sing their eternal songs, there was nothing but emptiness. This emptiness had a name, and that name was chaos. But chaos was not the wild, tumultuous disorder we might imagine today. Instead, it was a vast, peaceful void, a gentle darkness that stretched infinitely in all directions, like the softest blanket covering everything that was not yet born. In this primordial silence, there was no sound, no light, no movement. There was no up or down, no here or there. Time itself had not yet learned to flow like a river. It was a place of infinite possibility, where dreams could take any shape they desired, where thoughts could become real simply by being thought. Chaos was pregnant with all the wonders that would one day fill our world, but for now, it simply rested in perfect, undisturbed peace. Yet even in this tranquil void, something stirred. Not a movement you could see, for there was nothing yet to see with. Not a sound you could hear, for there were no ears to listen. It was more like a gentle sigh, a whisper of intention, a soft awakening from the deepest sleep. The void began to dream, and in dreaming, it began to change. From the heart of chaos, the first beings began to emerge, not born as we understand birth, but rather condensing like morning dew from the essence of possibility itself. These were not beings of flesh and blood, but rather the fundamental forces that would shape all existence. They came quietly, gently, like the first light of dawn creeping over a peaceful landscape. The first to emerge was Gaia, the Earth. She was not yet the green and blue planet we know today, but rather the potential for all solid things, all foundations, all places where life could one day take root. Gaia was warm and nurturing, like a mother's embrace, and she settled into the void with the contentment of one who knows her purpose. She would be the ground beneath all feet, the soil from which all plants would grow, the stable center around which everything else would dance. Next came Tartarus, the deep places far below. If Gaia was the welcoming surface, Tartarus was the mysterious depths, the hidden foundations that would support her from below. He was not frightening, despite what some stories might tell you, but rather quietly powerful, like the deep roots of an ancient tree. Tartarus understood that even in the deepest darkness, there was purpose and strength. Then, with a gentle flutter like butterfly wings, came Eros, who was love itself. Eros was not the mischievous Cupid of later stories, but the fundamental force that would bring all things together. Love, in this primordial form, was the attraction that would cause the scattered elements to find each other, to combine and create new wonders. Eros moved through the emerging cosmos like a warm breeze, touching everything with the desire to connect, to create, to become more than what each thing could be alone. Last came Erebus, the gentle darkness, and his companion Nyx, the soft night. They were not harsh or frightening, but rather the peaceful darkness that cradles all sleeping things. Erebus was the quiet shadow that gives rest to weary eyes, while Nyx was the velvet sky that would one day hold the stars like diamonds on her gown. Together, they brought the gift of peaceful sleep, the restoration that comes when the busy day finally ends. These 5 primordial beings, Gaia, Tartarus, Eros, Erebus, and Nyx, floated in the fading void of chaos like the first notes of a gentle lullaby. They were the foundation stones of all existence, the basic elements from which everything else would grow. And as they settled into their eternal roles, they began to interact with one another, drawn together by the gentle power of Eros, the love that binds all things. Erebus and Nyx, being of similar nature, found each other in the darkness, and from their union came the first children of the new cosmos. Their offspring were Ether, the bright upper air that would one day carry the light of the sun, and Hemera, the gentle day that would dance eternally with her mother Night. This was the first rhythm of existence, the peaceful alternation between day and night, activity and rest, wakefulness and sleep. As Ether rose higher and higher, he created space for the sky, while Hemera brought the first soft light to illuminate the growing world. Now there was a gentle distinction between the darkness of night and the brightness of day, though both were equally beautiful and necessary. The cosmos was beginning to find its rhythm, like a great heart beginning to beat with steady, peaceful pulses. Gaia, watching this first dance of light and darkness, felt stirring within herself the desire to create. She was the earth, and from her being would come all the solid, stable things that would give shape to the world. With a gentle effort, like a deep breath or a peaceful stretch upon waking, Gaia brought forth her first children from her own essence. First came Uranus, the vast sky, who spread himself like a protective dome over his mother. Uranus was the endless blue canopy that would hold the clouds and eventually the stars. He was as wide as Gaia herself, embracing her completely, creating the space between earth and heaven where all life would one day flourish. His presence was like a gentle, eternal embrace, constant and reassuring. Then Gaia created the mountains, the Aurea, who rose from her surface like the earth itself, stretching toward the sky. Each mountain was a child of Gaia, strong and enduring, their peaks touching the realm of Uranus above. They would be the pillars that held up the sky, the high places where earth and heaven could meet in peaceful communion. The mountains stood in silent majesty, their presence calming and eternal. Finally, Gaia brought forth Pontus, the ancient sea. Pontus was not the wild, stormy ocean that sailors would later fear, but rather the primordial waters that covered much of the early earth, vast, deep, and peacefully mysterious. His waters were warm and nurturing, like amniotic fluid in which life could develop and grow. Pontus flowed gently across Gaia's surface, his waves lapping softly at the shores that were beginning to form. Now the basic structure of the cosmos was in place. There was earth below and sky above, with mountains reaching between them and sea flowing across the landscape. Day and night took turns illuminating this peaceful realm, while the bright upper air carried light and the gentle darkness brought rest. Love moved through it all, encouraging growth and connection, while the deep places below provided stable foundations for everything above. But this was only the beginning of the great story. The cosmos was like a garden that had just been planted. The basic structure was there, but it would take time and care for it to flourish into the rich, vibrant world we know today. The primordial beings had created the stage, but now the real drama of creation was about to begin. As the first age of the world settled into its gentle rhythms, Gaia and Uranus looked upon what they had helped bring into being and felt a deep satisfaction. The void of chaos had been transformed into something organized and beautiful, a cosmos where order and peace could reign. The darkness was still there, but now it alternated with light. The emptiness was still there, but now it was filled with structure and meaning. And in this peaceful realm, lulled by the gentle rhythm of day and night, by the soft whisper of Pontus's waves and the quiet strength of the mountains, all of creation settled down to rest. The first chapter of the great story was complete, and everything that existed felt the deep contentment that comes at the end of a good day's work. The cosmos had been born from chaos, and it was good. In the peaceful early world, where day and night danced their eternal dance, and the mountains stood like gentle giants watching over the landscape, Gaia and Uranus looked upon their realm with growing love. The Earth Mother and the Sky Father found in each other a perfect complement. She was the stable foundation. He was the limitless expanse above. Together, they created a harmony that sang through every corner of the young cosmos. Their love was deep and constant, like the roots of trees reaching toward underground springs, like the endless patience of stones being shaped by flowing water. It was a love that created, and from their union would come the first great generation of divine beings who would give the world its character and personality. These children would be mighty and strange, beautiful and powerful, each one embodying some fundamental aspect of the natural world. The first children born to Gaia and Uranus were 12 beings of immense power and presence, whom the Greeks called the Titans. They were born from the deep places where earth and sky meet, where the solid and the ethereal come together in perfect balance. Each Titan was like a force of nature given form, magnificent and awe-inspiring, yet not harsh or frightening to contemplate. Oceanus was the first, and he was the great river that the ancients believed flowed around the entire world. He was not just water, but the very principle of flowing, of movement, of the way life circulates and renews itself constantly. Oceanus moved with the steady rhythm of tides, the patient persistence of streams carving through rock, the gentle insistence of rain nurturing the earth. His presence brought the promise that nothing would ever be completely still, that there would always be change, growth, and renewal. Beside him was Tethys, his wife and sister, who was the nurturing aspect of water. Where Oceanus was movement, Tethys was sustenance, the water that feeds the roots of plants, the moisture that rises to form clouds, the springs that never run dry. She was gentle motherhood in its most fundamental form, the principle that ensures life continues and thrives. Tethys moved through the world like a caring nurse, bringing refreshment wherever it was needed. Hyperion came forth like the first dawn the world had ever seen, though the sun itself had not yet been created. He was the Titan of light, the promise that illumination would always return after darkness, that clarity would follow confusion. Hyperion carried within himself the potential for all the lights that would one day fill the sky. Sun, moon, and stars were all sleeping within his radiant being, waiting for their time to awaken. His presence was like a gentle lamp carried through peaceful darkness. With Hyperion came Thea, whose name meant goddess or divine, and who embodied the quality that makes light precious and meaningful rather than merely bright. She was the shimmer on water, the glow of precious metals, the gleam in the eye of someone who has understood something wonderful. Thea taught the cosmos that light was not just illumination, but also beauty, inspiration, and the divine spark that makes ordinary things seem magical. Chaos was the Titan of the North, the direction of mystery and deep thinking. He represented the kind of intelligence that looks beyond the obvious, that asks deep questions and seeks understanding rather than just answers. Zeus was quiet and thoughtful, like a wise teacher who speaks little but whose words, when they come, carry great weight. He brought to the cosmos the gift of curiosity and the patience to pursue knowledge for its own sake. Phoebe, his wife, was the titan of prophecy and the moon's ancient wisdom. She knew things that had not yet happened, not because she controlled fate, but because she understood the deep patterns that run through all existence. Phoebe was like the wise grandmother who can look at a child and see the adult they will become, who understands that every ending contains a new beginning. Her presence brought the comfort of knowing that there is meaning and purpose in all things, even when that purpose is not yet clear. Cronus represented the constellations and the turning of the seasons, the great celestial clock that would one day help all creatures know when to plant and when to harvest, when to migrate and when to rest. He was the principle of cosmic order, the understanding that the universe follows patterns that can be learned and trusted. Cronus moved with the stately precision of the stars wheeling overhead, bringing the promise that time itself could be a friend rather than an enemy. Iapetus was the titan of the West, the direction of endings and completion. But he was not sad or frightening, rather, he embodied the satisfaction that comes when something is finished well, the peace that follows, a job completed. Iapetus understood that endings make beginnings possible, that completion is necessary for renewal. He was like the gentle twilight that signals the end of day and the approach of restful sleep. Themis was perhaps the most gentle of all the Titans, for she was divine law, not harsh human law, with its punishments and restrictions, but the natural law that keeps everything in harmony. She was the principle that ensures rivers flow downhill, that seasons follow their proper order, that children grow up to care for their parents in turn. Themis brought justice in its most loving form, the understanding that everyone and everything has its proper place and role in the great symphony of existence. Mnemosyne was memory itself, the titan who ensured that nothing good would ever be completely lost. She preserved not just facts and events, but also feelings, experiences, and the wisdom that comes from living through both joy and sorrow. Mnemosyne was like a vast, loving library, where every story that ever mattered was kept safe forever. Her presence promised that every act of love, every moment of beauty, every lesson learned would somehow endure and enrich the world. Cronus, the youngest of the male Titans, was time itself, not the harsh, devouring time that ages and destroys, but time as the great enabler, the force that allows seeds to grow into trees, children to become adults, and experiences to ripen into wisdom. Cronus was patient and methodical, understanding that the best things cannot be rushed, but must be allowed to develop at their own natural pace. He carried within himself the promise that there would always be enough time for what truly mattered. Finally, there was Rhea, whose name meant flow, and who was the titan of fertility and generation. She was the principle that ensures life continues, that creation is an ongoing process rather than a single event. Rhea embodied the joy of new beginnings, the excitement of potential being realized, the deep satisfaction of nurturing growth. She moved through the cosmos like spring itself, bringing renewal and the promise of abundance wherever she went. These 12 titans were the cosmos's first attempt to organize and understand itself. They were like the fundamental forces of nature given personality and consciousness, each one responsible for maintaining some essential aspect of the world's harmony. They dwelt in the high places where earth met sky, in the deep places where water met stone, in the bright places where light met air. But Gaia and Uranus were not finished with their creating. Their love was so abundant that it overflowed into new forms, and their next children were beings of a very different nature from the stately Titans. These were the Cyclopes, and they were born with a single eye in the center of their foreheads, not as a mark of monstrosity, but as a symbol of their unique way of seeing the world. The 3 Cyclopes were named Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, which meant thunder, lightning, and bright flash. They were the first craftsmen of the cosmos, born with an innate understanding of how to work with fire and metal, how to create tools and weapons and objects of beauty. Their single eye allowed them to see directly to the heart of things, to understand the inner nature of stone and metal, to perceive the patterns that lay hidden within raw materials. Brontes could hear the voice of thunder sleeping in the heart of storms, and he knew how to wake it gently so that it would rumble reassuringly across the sky rather than crack and frighten. His thunder was like the deep purr of a contented cat, powerful but comforting, a sound that promised rain and growth rather than destruction. When he worked at his forge, the rhythmic hammering of his tools created a music that harmonized with the beating of the cosmos's great heart. Steropes understood lightning not as a dangerous force, but as concentrated energy that could be shaped and directed for useful purposes. He saw how the spark of life itself was like lightning, quick and bright and transformative. When Steropes worked, tiny lightnings danced around his hands, not burning but illuminating, helping him to see exactly how each piece of his work should be shaped. His lightning was like inspiration made visible, the flash of understanding that comes when everything suddenly makes sense. Arges, whose name meant bright flash, was the master of brilliant light, the kind of light that reveals hidden things, that makes the invisible visible. His light was not harsh or blinding. but rather the perfect illumination that shows everything in its true colors and proportions. When Arges held up one of his creations, it would gleam with an inner radiance that revealed its perfect craftsmanship and the love that had gone into its making. The Cyclopes were joyful workers, taking deep satisfaction in creating beautiful and useful things. They sang as they worked, their voices harmonizing with the ring of their hammers and the hiss of hot metal being shaped. They understood that creation was not just about making new things, but about discovering the potential that already existed within raw materials and helping it to manifest in the world. But Gaia and Uranus had one more gift to give to the cosmos, though this gift would prove to be more challenging than their previous children. Their final offspring were three beings called the Hecatoncheires, which meant 100-handed ones. These beings had 50 heads and 100 arms each, and they embodied the principle of overwhelming abundance, the idea that sometimes more is indeed more, that there are situations that call for multiple perspectives and many hands working together. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges were their names, and they were as gentle as they were mighty. Their many arms meant that they could embrace many people at once, could work on multiple projects simultaneously, could offer help wherever it was needed without ever having to choose between competing demands. Their many heads meant that they could think about problems from numerous angles at once, could hold many different ideas in their minds simultaneously, could offer counsel that took all perspectives into account. Cottus was like a master gardener who could tend to hundreds of plants at once, each arm knowing exactly what each plant needed: water, sunlight, pruning, or simply a gentle touch. His 50 heads allowed him to keep track of every detail while also seeing the garden as a whole, understanding how each plant contributed to the overall beauty and health of the entire space. Briareus was the diplomat among the three, able to listen to many different viewpoints simultaneously and find the common ground that connected them all. With his 100 hands, he could offer comfort to anyone who was troubled, could guide conflicting parties toward understanding, could literally hold people together when they were pulling apart. His presence brought the promise that no problem was too complex to be solved if approached with enough patience and perspective. Gyges was the protector, able to defend multiple things at once without ever having to choose what to save and what to sacrifice. His many arms could create barriers against harm while simultaneously offering help to those in need. His many heads meant that no threat could approach unseen, no cry for help could go unheard. He embodied the principle that true strength is not about dominating others, but about having the power to protect and nurture. These children of earth and scythe titans, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, represented the cosmos's growing complexity and richness. They were the first generation of beings who were more than just fundamental forces, who had personalities and individual characteristics, who could make choices and form relationships with each other. Through them, the universe was learning what it meant to be alive, to be creative, to be social and cooperative. As this first great family established itself in the peaceful cosmos, there was a sense of completion and satisfaction. The basic structure of the universe was not only in place, but was now populated with beings who could maintain it, improve it, and help it continue to grow. The rhythm of day and night continued its gentle dance. The mountains stood in their eternal majesty, the seas flowed in their appointed courses, and the sky spread its protective canopy over all. But even in this peaceful time, the seeds of future change were already present. For the cosmos was still young and still learning about itself, and sometimes the greatest growth comes not from perfect harmony, but from the creative tension that arises when different perspectives meet and interact. The stage was set for the next great chapter in the story of creation, when the peaceful order of the early world would give way to something richer and more complex. For now, though, all was well. The children of heaven and earth dwelt in contentment in their beautiful realm, each one contributing their unique gifts to the great symphony of existence. The cosmos had grown from a simple duet between earth and sky into a full orchestra, with each member playing their part in perfect harmony. And in this harmony, the universe rested and prepared for whatever wonders the future might bring. In the early ages of the world, when time moved more slowly and gently than it does today, there came a period that would later be remembered as the Golden Age. This was when Cronus, the youngest and most thoughtful of the Titans, came to rule over the cosmos, bringing with him an era of such peace and abundance that it seemed as though the universe had finally found its perfect rhythm. But before we speak of that golden time, we must tell of the events that led to it, for even in paradise, change is the one constant, and growth sometimes requires difficult transitions. The cosmos, like a child learning to walk, had to stumble a few times before it could find its steady stride. For many peaceful eons, Uranus had ruled as the first king of the universe, his vast sky form embracing Gaia in an eternal loving union. Their children, the Titans, Cyclopes, and Hecatoncheires, had grown to maturity in this stable realm, each finding their place and purpose in the great harmony of existence. But as time passed, Uranus began to change in ways that troubled the gentle order of the early world. Perhaps it was the weight of responsibility, or perhaps it was simply the natural evolution of consciousness learning about power, but Uranus gradually became possessive of his position as sole ruler of the cosmos. He began to fear that his mighty children might one day challenge his authority, and this fear grew like a shadow in his heart, dimming the bright love that had once characterized his relationship with Gaia. In his growing anxiety, Uranus made a decision that brought the first real sorrow to the peaceful world. He decided that his youngest children, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, were too powerful to be allowed their freedom. Despite their gentle natures and their obvious love for their parents, Uranus convinced himself that they posed a threat that had to be contained. So he took these beloved children and hid them away in Tartarus, the deep places far below the Earth's surface. This was not the punishment of a cruel tyrant, but rather the misguided action of a parent who had allowed fear to overcome wisdom. Uranus told himself he was protecting the cosmic order, but in truth he was disrupting it by allowing fear to drive his decisions. Gaia, the Earth Mother, felt this injury to her children as a physical pain in her own being. The Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires were part of her essence, and their imprisonment was like having part of herself torn away and locked in darkness. She pleaded with Uranus to reconsider, to remember the love that had brought their children into being, but fear had clouded his judgment too deeply for him to hear her words. As eons passed and Uranus refused to release their imprisoned children, Gaia's sorrow gradually transformed into a determined resolve. She realized that sometimes, even in the most loving relationships, one person must take action to correct a mistake that the other cannot see. This was not revenge or rebellion in any harsh sense, but rather the natural response of the Earth Mother protecting all her children. Gaia went to her 12 Titan children and shared with them her grief and her resolve. She explained that their father, blinded by fear, had forgotten the fundamental principle of love that should guide all relationships in the cosmos. She asked them to help her correct this imbalance, not by destroying or punishing Uranus, but by creating a change that would allow wisdom to replace fear in the governance of the universe. Most of the Titans were reluctant to act against their father, for they still loved him despite his mistake. They hoped that time might heal the rift and restore the family's harmony without requiring any dramatic action. But Cronus, the youngest, understood that some problems cannot be solved by waiting, that sometimes love requires courage to act decisively. Cronus was uniquely suited for this task because he was time itself, and he understood better than anyone that all things must change, that even the most entrenched situations contain the seeds of their own transformation. He also understood that his father's reign, however well-intentioned it had once been, had become stuck in patterns that prevented growth and healing. With a heavy heart but a clear conscience, Cronus accepted the responsibility that his mother placed upon him. He would challenge his father's authority, not out of ambition or hatred, but out of love for the cosmic order and compassion for his imprisoned siblings. It was perhaps the most difficult decision ever made in the young universe, requiring Cronus to act against his natural filial affection for the greater good of all. The confrontation between father and son was not the violent battle that some stories describe, but rather a profound moment of cosmic transition. Cronus, embodying the principle that all things must change and evolve, gently but firmly relieved his father of the burden of absolute rule. It was like autumn peacefully taking over from summer, or night naturally following Gaia, necessary transition that allowed the universe to continue its growth. Uranus, freed from the weight of kingship and the fears that had consumed him, began to remember who he truly was, the loving sky, who had once embraced Gaia with such joy. He withdrew to the highest heavens, where he could return to his original purpose of providing the vast, protective canopy under which all life could flourish. Though saddened by the necessity of change, he came to understand that his son had acted out of love, not rebellion. Cronus's first act as the new ruler of the cosmos was to release his imprisoned brothers from Tartarus. The Cyclopes and Hecaton chairs emerged blinking into the light, not bitter or resentful despite their long confinement, but rather grateful to be reunited with their family and ready to contribute their gifts to the cosmic harmony once again. Their forgiveness was immediate and complete, for they understood that even good people sometimes make mistakes when they are afraid. With this act of liberation, Cronus established the principle that would characterize his rule, that power should be used to free and enable rather than to control and restrict. He understood that true authority comes not from forcing obedience, but from creating conditions in which everyone can flourish according to their nature. Under Cronus's wise governance, the cosmos entered its golden age. This was not called golden because of material wealth, but because it was a time when everything seemed to glow with inner light, when harmony and abundance were the natural state of affairs. Time itself, under Cronus's guidance, became a friend rather than an enemy. Change occurred gently and naturally, without the harsh disruptions that would characterize later ages. In this golden time, the Titans took on their full roles as the organizing principles of the universe. Oceanus and Tethys managed the flow of all waters, ensuring that every spring ran clear and every river reached the sea. Hyperion and Thea brought perfect light to the world, not too harsh, not too dim, but exactly what was needed to help all things grow and thrive. Coeus and Phoebe became the patrons of wisdom and prophecy, helping all conscious beings understand their place in the great pattern of existence. Crius managed the orderly progression of seasons and celestial cycles, while Iapetus oversaw the peaceful transitions that marked the natural endings and beginnings of all processes. Themis established the laws of natural justice, not harsh punishments, but the gentle guidance that helps everyone understand right from wrong intuitively. Mnemosyne became the keeper of all precious memories, ensuring that no act of love or moment of beauty would ever be forgotten. And Rhea, who would become Cronus's beloved wife, brought the gift of renewal and regeneration to every aspect of the cosmos. The Cyclopes established the first great workshops in the heart of mountains, where they created wonders that served the common good. They made tools that helped farmers tend their crops, instruments that helped musicians create beautiful melodies, and devices that helped scholars study the stars. Their single eye allowed them to see the true purpose hidden within every project, ensuring that everything they made served love rather than fear. The Hecaton shares became the great coordinators of large-scale projects, their many hands and heads allowing them to organize vast undertakings that benefited the entire cosmos. They helped coordinate the movements of celestial bodies, ensuring that all the stars and planets moved in harmony with each other. They organized the great festivals where all the divine beings came together to celebrate the beauty of existence. Their presence brought the understanding that complex tasks could be accomplished joyfully when many beings worked together with shared purpose. During this golden age, mortals also came into being, though they were very different from the humans we know today. These first mortals were called the Golden Race, and they lived lives of such ease and contentment that they seemed more like happy children than struggling adults. They were born fully grown from the earth itself, emerging like flowers blooming in spring, already possessed of all the knowledge they needed to live well. The Golden Race knew no sickness, no aging, no fear of death. When their long, peaceful lives finally came to an end, they simply fell asleep and did not wake up, transitioning gently to whatever comes after life as easily as one moves from a warm, sunlit room into a cool, shaded garden. They felt no pain in this transition, only a gentle curiosity about what new adventures might await them. These golden mortals lived in perfect harmony with the natural world and with each other. They needed no laws, because they instinctively understood what was right and good. They needed no rulers because everyone naturally took responsibility for their own actions and helped their neighbors without being asked. They needed no walls or weapons because the idea of harming another being simply never occurred to them. Their days were filled with simple, pleasure-extending gardens that grew magnificent fruits and flowers without effort, creating beautiful music and poetry, engaging in philosophical discussions under the shade of great trees, playing games that brought laughter echoing across the peaceful landscape. They lived as friends with all the animals, understanding their languages and sharing their wisdom with the creatures of field and forest. The earth provided everything they needed without requiring hard labor. Trees bore fruit year-round. Streams ran with fresh water that never failed. The weather was always mild and pleasant. The golden mortals spent their time in creative pursuits and gentle work that felt more like play than toil. They were gardeners and artists, storytellers and musicians, philosophers and friends. Cronus and Rhea watched over this golden world with the contentment of parents seeing their children thrive. The cosmos had found its rhythm, and everything seemed to be unfolding according to the deepest principles of love and harmony. Time flowed like honey, sweet and golden, carrying all beings gently forward without urgency or pressure. But even in this perfect age, the seeds of change were quietly growing. For the universe was still young and still learning about itself, and part of that learning involved discovering that even the most beautiful patterns must eventually evolve into something new. Cronus, being time itself, understood this better than anyone, yet, like all parents, he hoped to preserve the happiness of his children for as long as possible. The change began subtly as a prophecy whispered by Gaia in the deep places of the earth. She had learned from her own experience with Uranus that power, no matter how benevolently exercised, could sometimes become rigid and resistant to necessary change. She foresaw that Cronus, despite his wisdom and good intentions, would eventually face the same choice that Uranus had faced, whether to trust in the natural evolution of the cosmos or to try to preserve the status quo through control. The prophecy spoke of a child who would be born to Cronus and Rhea, a child who would one day surpass his father, just as Cronus had surpassed Uranus. This was not meant as a threat or a curse, but simply as a recognition of the natural pattern of growth and renewal that governs all existence. Each generation builds upon the achievements of the previous one, reaching higher and seeing farther because they stand on the shoulders of those who came before. When Cronus first heard this prophecy, he received it with the calm wisdom that had characterized his rule. He understood that all things must change, that his own reign was just one chapter in the great story of creation. He felt no fear or resentment at the idea that his children might one day exceed his own accomplishments. Indeed, what greater success could a parent have than raising children who surpass them? But as time passed, the same fear that had once clouded Uranus's judgment began to whisper in Cronus's mind. Perhaps it was the weight of responsibility for the perfect golden age, or perhaps it was simply the natural tendency of consciousness to become attached to familiar patterns. Gradually, Cronus began to worry not about losing power, but about disrupting the beautiful harmony that his rule had created. He convinced himself that the prophecy represented a threat to the Golden Age, that change would necessarily mean the end of the peaceful abundance that all beings were enjoying. He forgot that change could also mean growth, improvement, and new forms of beauty that had not yet been imagined. Fear began to override wisdom, just as it had done with his father before him. When Rhea gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Hestia, who embodied the warm, nurturing hearth that makes any place feel like home, Cronus made a decision that would haunt him for ages to come. Convinced that any of his children might be the one foretold in the prophecy, he decided to prevent the prophecy from coming true by ensuring that none of his children could grow up to challenge him. In a moment of tragic irony, Cronus, who had once freed his own siblings from imprisonment, now chose to imprison his own children in the only prison he thought was secure, his own being. He swallowed little Hestia whole, trapping her in a timeless space within himself where she could not grow or develop or fulfill her destiny. Rhea was heartbroken, but Cronus assured her that this was necessary to preserve the Golden Age for all the other beings in the cosmos. He had convinced himself that the sacrifice of his own children's freedom was a price worth paying to maintain the peace and prosperity that so many others enjoyed. It was the same mistake his father had made, but Cronus could not see the parallel because fear had blinded him to his own patterns. When their second child was born, Demeter, who carried within herself the power to make all plants grow and flourish, Cronus swallowed her as well. Then came Hera, who embodied the principle of partnership and commitment in relationships, and she too disappeared into her father's fearful embrace. Hades followed, bringing with him mastery over the hidden treasures of the earth and the gentle guidance of souls in transition, but he also was consumed by his father's anxiety. Finally came Poseidon, who held dominion over all the waters of the world, and who could have helped his uncle Oceanus manage the great currents that connected all lands. But he too was swallowed by Cronus, joining his siblings in the strange, timeless prison of their father's fear. With each child that disappeared, the Golden Age began to lose some of its luster. The cosmos could sense that something was wrong, that the natural pattern of growth and renewal was being disrupted. The golden mortals noticed that their world, while still beautiful, no longer seemed to be moving toward anything new or exciting. It was as if time itself had become stuck, circling endlessly through the same perfect patterns without the possibility of growth or discovery. Rhea, meanwhile, was experiencing a sorrow deeper than any that had yet been known in the cosmos. She was the titan of fertility and generation, and to have her children taken from her was like asking a river to stop flowing or a tree to stop growing. She loved Cronus deeply and understood his fear, but she also knew that his actions were creating exactly the kind of stagnation that would eventually destroy the very thing he was trying to preserve. As she prepared to give birth to her sixth child, Rhea made a decision that would change the course of cosmic history. She would not allow this child to suffer the same fate as his siblings. She would find a way to honor both her love for Cronus and her responsibility to the future, even if it meant making difficult choices that might cause pain in the short term. When the time came for the birth, Rhea traveled to a hidden cave on the island of Crete, far from Cronus's watchful eye. There, in the ancient darkness that remembered the first stirrings of creation, she gave birth to a son who would carry within himself the power to free not only his siblings, but the entire cosmos from the paralysis of fear. She named this child Zeus, which meant bright sky, for she could see in his eyes the lightning that would one day illuminate new possibilities for the world. He was born during a terrible storm, but instead of being frightened by the thunder and lightning, he seemed to laugh at it as if he recognized kindred spirits in the wild forces of nature. Rhea wrapped the baby Zeus in soft blankets and entrusted him to the care of the nymphs who lived in the sacred cave. These ancient beings, daughters of the earth itself, understood the importance of protecting this child who would one day restore balance to the cosmos. They fed him on honey and the milk of the divine goat Amalthea, and they sang to him the old songs that told of the time when the universe was young and full of infinite possibility. Meanwhile, Rhea returned to Cronus with a large stone wrapped in baby clothes. So blinded was he by his fear, and so eager was he to eliminate the threat he imagined, that Cronus swallowed the stone without even looking closely at what he thought was his newest child. The deception was not meant to mock him, but rather to buy time for wisdom to overcome fear, for love to heal the wounds that terror had created. And so the Golden Age reached its end, not through any external catastrophe, but through the simple tragedy of fear overcoming love in the heart of one who should have known better. Cronus continued to rule over a cosmos that was still beautiful but no longer growing, still peaceful but no longer dynamic. He had preserved the form of the Golden Age, but had lost its essential spirit, the openness to change and growth that makes life truly golden. Hidden away in his cave, young Zeus grew strong and wise, learning from the nymphs and the other creatures of the wild places the lessons that his father had forgotten. He learned that true strength comes not from controlling others but from empowering them, that real security lies not in preventing change but in adapting skillfully to whatever changes come. Most importantly, he learned that love is not something to be grasped and hoarded, but something to be shared freely, trusting that the more love you give away, the more you will have. The stage was set for the next great transformation of the cosmos, when the stuck patterns of the fading Golden Age would give way to something more dynamic and challenging, but ultimately more truly alive. The universe was about to learn that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most difficult packages, and that the courage to embrace change is the most precious inheritance any parent can give to their children. In the hidden cave on Crete, where ancient stalactites wept mineral tears and underground streams sang lullabies older than memory, Zeus grew from infant to child to young adult with the speed of seasonal change. The divine goat Amalthea, whose milk had nourished him, became his first companion and teacher, showing him that strength and gentleness could exist together in perfect harmony. The Curetes, those mystical beings who guarded the sacred places of the earth, taught him to move with stealth and purpose, to observe before acting, and to understand the deep patterns that govern all natural processes. As Zeus matured, the nymphs shared with him the secret history of the cosmos show it had begun in peaceful void, how love had brought order from chaos, how fear had disrupted the natural flow of growth and renewal. They helped him understand that his father Cronus was not evil, but rather trapped in a pattern of thinking that had served its purpose but now prevented further evolution. This knowledge filled Zeus not with anger toward his father, but with compassion and a determination to help heal the cosmic family's wounds. The young god learned by watching the world around him how different aspects of nature solved their problems. He observed how rivers carved new channels when their old paths became blocked, how forests regrew after fires had cleared away dead undergrowth, how seasons followed each other in endless cycles of death and rebirth. From these observations, he began to understand that sometimes apparent destruction was actually a form of creative renewal. Zeus also learned about leadership by watching the society of bees that lived near his cave. He saw how a good queen served her hive not by dominating it, but by enabling every bee to contribute their unique gifts to the common good. He watched how the worker bees made decisions collectively, how they communicated with each other through dance and pheromone, how they balanced individual initiative with group coordination. These lessons would serve him well when the time came to create a new form of cosmic governance. During his years of growth and learning, Zeus often felt the pull of his imprisoned siblings, their life force calling to him from within their father's being. He could sense their personalities, even though he had never met them. Hestia's warm, nurturing presence, Demeter's deep connection to growing things, Hera's fierce loyalty and protective instincts, Hades' quiet wisdom and comfort with hidden truths, Poseidon's dynamic energy and love of freedom. He knew that the cosmos needed their gifts, and that freeing them was not just a family obligation, but a cosmic necessity. As Zeus reached full maturity, he began to venture out from his cave to explore the wider world and assess the state of the cosmos under his father's rule. What he found was beautiful but stagnant a universe frozen in perfect patterns that no longer allowed for growth or surprise. The golden mortals still lived their peaceful lives, but they had begun to lose their sense of purpose and direction. Without challenges to overcome or goals to strive toward, they were becoming listless and disconnected from the deeper meaning of existence. The Titans, too, seemed caught in endless repetition of their established roles. While they maintained the cosmic order efficiently, they had lost the creative spark that had once made their work joyful. Even the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, despite their freedom, found themselves with little meaningful work to do in a world where everything had already been perfected. Zeus realized that the time had come for him to fulfill his destiny, not as a destroyer of the old order, but as a catalyst for necessary change. He understood that confronting his father would be one of the most difficult tasks he would ever face, requiring him to act with perfect balance between firmness and compassion, justice and mercy. Before approaching Cronus directly, Zeus sought allies who understood the need for change. He first went to his grandmother Gaia, the Earth Mother, who had witnessed the entire history of creation and understood the cosmic patterns better than anyone. She welcomed him with tears of joy, for she had been waiting long ages for this moment when the cycle of fear and control could finally be broken. Gaia shared with Zeus the wisdom she had gained from her long experience. She explained that true leadership was not about imposing one's will on others, but about creating conditions in which everyone could flourish according to their nature. She taught him that power was most effective when it was shared rather than hoarded, and that the greatest strength came from empowering others rather than controlling them. She also gave Zeus a precious gift, a special potion that would cause Cronus to regurgitate the children he had swallowed, freeing them unharmed from their timeless prison. This potion had been brewed from herbs that grew only in the deepest places of the earth, mixed with water from the first springs that had ever flowed, and blessed with the accumulated wisdom of all the mothers who had ever lost children to fear and prejudice. Next, Zeus approached his uncle Oceanus, whose great river encircled the world and connected all lands and peoples. Oceanus had grown troubled by the stagnation that had settled over the cosmos, and he welcomed Zeus's plans for renewal. He offered to use his connections with rivers, springs, and seas throughout the world to spread the message that change was coming and to help coordinate the efforts of all who desired a more dynamic and living cosmos. Zeus also gained the support of Themis, the Titan of divine law and natural justice. She understood that Cronus's actions, while motivated by understandable fears, had violated the fundamental principle that parents should nurture their children's growth rather than restrict it. Themis assured Zeus that his planned intervention was not rebellion, but rather a restoration of natural law, an act of cosmic healing rather than violence. Even some of Cronus's own generation supported Zeus's mission. Iapetus, the titan of endings and completion, recognized that his brother's reign had reached its natural conclusion and needed to transition into something new. Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, reminded Zeus that his father had once been a liberator himself, and that helping Cronus remember his own true nature was just as important as freeing the imprisoned siblings. With this support network in place, Zeus felt ready to approach his father. But he did not come as a conqueror or a rebel instead. He came in disguise as a simple cupbearer, offering to serve in Cronus's court. This approach allowed him to observe his father closely and to understand the depth of the fear and isolation that had driven him to such desperate measures. What Zeus saw saddened him greatly. Cronus had become a prisoner of his own fears, unable to enjoy the beautiful world he ruled because he was constantly watching for threats that existed mainly in his imagination. He had isolated himself from his wife Rhea, from his fellow titans, and from the natural joy of existence, creating exactly the kind of lonely, fearful life that he had been trying to avoid. Zeus served his father faithfully for many days, gaining his trust and learning to understand the pain that lay behind his actions. He came to see that Cronus was not a villain, but rather a well-intentioned leader who had been overwhelmed by the complexity of his responsibilities and had made choices based on fear rather than wisdom. This understanding filled Zeus with even greater determination to help heal the situation for everyone involved. When the moment finally came, Zeus offered his father a special cup of wine mixed with Gaia's potion. Cronus, trusting the young cupbearer who had served him so well, drank deeply without suspicion. The effect was immediate but not violent. Instead of causing pain or distress, the potion worked like a gentle medicine, healing the fear sickness that had infected Cronus's judgment and allowing his natural love and wisdom to reassert themselves. As the potion took effect, Cronus began to remember who he truly was: not a fearful tyrant, but a loving father who had always wanted the best for his children. The artificial barriers that fear had created in his mind began to dissolve, and with them went the magical prison that had held his children captive. One by one, his swallowed offspring emerged from his being, not as angry rebels, but as beloved children returning home after a long journey. First came Poseidon, erupting like a powerful spring, with laughter and joy at his freedom. He embraced his father without resentment, understanding that fear had been the enemy, not Cronus himself. Then came Hades, quiet and thoughtful, carrying with him wisdom gained from his time in the strange realm of suspended existence. He too showed no anger, only compassion for the father who had acted out of misguided love. Hera emerged with fierce protectiveness, but her anger was directed at the fear that had separated the family rather than at any individual person. Demeter came forth like springtime itself, ready to help heal the wounds that isolation and control had created in the cosmic order. Finally, Hestia appeared like a warm hearth fire, bringing with her the promise that home and family could be restored even after the greatest disruptions. The reunion of the divine family was not without its challenges. Years of separation and misunderstanding could not be healed instantly, and there were difficult conversations about trust, responsibility, and the need for new forms of cosmic governance. But these discussions took place in an atmosphere of love and mutual respect, with everyone committed to finding solutions that would serve the greater good. Cronus, freed from the fear that had driven his actions, was able to see clearly for the first time in ages. He understood that his reign had served its purpose, but that the cosmos now needed a different kind of leadership, more collaborative, more dynamic, more open to growth and change. With the wisdom that comes from accepting difficult truths, he abdicated his throne and passed the responsibility for cosmic governance to his children. But this transition was not accomplished through violence or revolution. Instead, it took the form of a great family council where all the divine beings worked together to design a new system of government that would avoid the problems of the past while building on its strengths. They created a structure where power would be shared among many rather than concentrated in one, where decisions would be made collectively rather than imposed from above. Zeus was chosen as the coordinator of this new system, not because he was the strongest or most ambitious, but because he had demonstrated the wisdom to heal rather than harm, to include rather than exclude, to empower rather than control. His siblings each took responsibility for different aspects of cosmic governance. Poseidon for the seas and waters, Hades for the hidden realms and the transition between life and death, Hera for the sacred bonds of relationship and family, Demeter for the growing things that sustained all life, and Hestia for the hearth fires that made every place feel like home. The older generation of Titans were not displaced, but rather became elder advisors, sharing their vast experience and wisdom with the younger gods while remaining responsible for the fundamental forces they had always managed. Cronus himself chose to become the guardian of a special realm where time moved differently, where beings could go to rest and reflect and gain perspective on the great patterns of existence. This new cosmic order represented something unprecedented in the history of creation, a government based on cooperation rather than dominance, on inclusion rather than exclusion, on trust rather than fear. It was not perfect, for no system created by imperfect beings could be perfect, but it was dynamic and self-correcting, capable of learning from its mistakes and adapting to new challenges. As the New Age began, the stagnation that had characterized the end of the Golden Age started to lift. The cosmos began to breathe again, to grow and change and explore new possibilities. The golden mortals found new purposes and challenges that rekindled their enthusiasm for life. The divine beings discovered new ways to use their gifts in service of the greater good. But perhaps most importantly, the universe had learned a crucial lesson about the nature of leadership and governance. It had discovered that true authority comes not from the power to control others, but from the ability to inspire them. Not from the capacity to impose one's will, but from the skill to help others discover their own potential. The cosmos had grown from a realm ruled by benevolent autocracy to one governed by collaborative wisdom, and this represented a fundamental evolution in consciousness itself. The dawn of this new age brought with it challenges and opportunities that none of the previous eras had faced. There would be conflicts to resolve, problems to solve, and new forms of beauty to create. But there was also a sense of unlimited possibility, a feeling that the universe had finally found a form of organization that could adapt and grow and thrive, regardless of what challenges the future might bring. And in this atmosphere of renewed hope and dynamic possibility, all the beings of the cosmos settled down to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new discoveries, and new opportunities to participate in the great ongoing story of creation. The universe had learned to trust in its own capacity for growth and renewal, and that trust would carry it forward into whatever wonders lay ahead. As the first light of the new age spread across the cosmos, bringing with it the gentle promise of growth and renewal, the divine family worked together to create a world that would be both beautiful and dynamic, stable and free. This was not the static perfection of the Golden Age, but rather a living harmony that could adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential character. It was like a great symphony where each musician could improvise freely while still contributing to the overall beauty of the music. Zeus, as the coordinator of this new cosmic order, faced the delicate task of helping his siblings find their unique roles while ensuring that their individual gifts complemented rather than conflicted with each other. He understood that true leadership meant creating an environment where everyone could flourish according to their nature, and he worked tirelessly to establish the kind of collaborative governance that would make this possible. The first great challenge came when the siblings had to decide how to divide the realms of existence among themselves. Rather than fighting over territories or claiming dominance, they chose to approach this division as an opportunity for creative collaboration. They understood that the cosmos was vast enough for all of them, and that their different strengths would be most effective when they complemented each other. After much thoughtful discussion and consultation with the elder Titans, they reached a decision that satisfied everyone's deepest needs and desires. Zeus would oversee the sky and the upper air, the realm of weather and celestial movements, where his natural affinity for lightning and storms could serve the greater good. From his high vantage point, he could see the entire cosmos and help coordinate the activities of all the other divine beings. Poseidon gladly accepted dominion over all the waters of the world, the seas and rivers, springs and lakes, the moisture that rises to form clouds, and the rain that nourishes the earth. His dynamic, restless nature was perfectly suited to governing the flowing, changing realm of water, and he brought to it an energy and vitality that made every stream dance with joy. Under his care, the waters became not just life-sustaining, but life-celebrating, carrying songs and stories from shore to shore. Hades, with his quiet wisdom and comfort with hidden truths, became the guardian of the underworld, not a realm of punishment and despair, but rather the peaceful place where souls could rest and reflect between their various experiences of existence. He understood that death was not an ending, but a transformation, and he created a realm that honored both the completion of one phase of being and the preparation for whatever might come next. Hera chose to become the protector of marriage and family relationships, understanding that the bonds between beings were the fundamental building blocks of any healthy society. She worked to ensure that partnerships were based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than mere convenience or obligation. Her presence brought the blessing of deep commitment and the strength that comes when two or more beings choose to face life's challenges together. Demeter took responsibility for all growing things, crops and wildflowers, forests and meadows, fruit trees and grain fields. She understood that the capacity to nurture growth was one of the most sacred gifts in the universe, and she used her power to ensure that the earth would always be abundantly fertile and generous. Under her care, every seed planted with love would find the conditions it needed to flourish. Hestia, eldest and wisest of the siblings, chose what might have seemed the humblest role but was actually one of the most important. She became the guardian of the hearth, the sacred fire that makes any place feel like home. Her presence brought the peace and contentment that come from knowing that one belongs somewhere, that one is valued and welcome. In a cosmos that was becoming increasingly complex and dynamic, her gift of stability and warmth was more precious than gold. With these basic roles established, the divine siblings began the joyful work of creating a world that would be worthy of all the beings who would inhabit it. They collaborated like master craftspeople working on a single great project, each contributing their unique skills while constantly consulting with each other to ensure that their individual efforts served the greater vision. Zeus began by establishing the great celestial order that would govern the movements of sun, moon, and stars. He worked with the Titans Hyperion and Theia to create luminous bodies that would not only provide light and warmth, but would also serve as a great cosmic calendar, helping all beings understand the rhythms of time and season. The sun was designed to be a gentle, nurturing presence that encouraged growth without overwhelming, while the moon was crafted to provide soft guidance through the darkness and to govern the subtle tides that connected all water everywhere. The stars were arranged in patterns that would tell stories and provide navigation for travelers, but also in configurations that would inspire wonder and contemplation in all who looked up at the night sky. Each constellation was like a chapter in the great book of cosmic wisdom, readable by those who took the time to study the ancient language of light and shadow. Poseidon, meanwhile, was busy designing the vast network of waterways that would connect all parts of the world. He created currents that would carry nutrients from place to place, ensuring that no region would be permanently barren or isolated. His rivers were designed to be highways for both goods and ideas, allowing different communities to learn from each other and share their discoveries. The seas he created were challenging enough to promote courage and skill in those who sailed them, but not so dangerous as to discourage exploration and trade. He also worked with his sister Demeter to establish the hydrological cycle that would ensure a steady supply of fresh water for all living things. The rain that fell from Zeus's clouds would be guided by Poseidon's wisdom to reach exactly where it was needed most, while the rivers and streams would carry away excess water to prevent flooding and stagnation. Hades devoted his energies to creating a realm that would comfort and restore souls, making the transition from one form of existence to another. His underworld was not a place of eternal punishment, but rather a peaceful sanctuary where beings could rest from the labors of life and gain perspective on their experiences. He created gardens where the souls of the departed could walk and reflect, libraries where they could study the deeper mysteries of existence, and gathering places where they could share their stories with others who had completed similar journeys. Most importantly, Hades established the principle that death should never be feared but rather understood as a natural part of the great cycle of existence. He ensured that the transition from life to whatever comes after would always be gentle and guided, with no soul ever having to face the unknown alone or unprepared. Hera worked to establish the social bonds that would hold communities together and give meaning to individual lives. She created the institution of marriage as a sacred partnership where two beings could support each other through all of life's joys and challenges, growing stronger together than either could be alone. But her influence extended beyond romantic partnerships to include all forms of family bonds, the relationships between parents and children, siblings and cousins, friends who become like family through choice rather than birth. She established the customs of hospitality that would ensure travelers were always welcome, the traditions of celebration that would mark important life transitions, and the rituals of reconciliation that would heal conflicts before they could poison relationships. Her presence brought the understanding that individual happiness was intimately connected to the health of the community, and that caring for others was not a burden but a privilege. Demeter turned her attention to creating a world where all beings would have abundance without anyone having to suffer want. She designed plants that would be not only nutritious but also beautiful, filling the world with flowers that brought joy to the eye and fruits that delighted the palate. Her grains grew tall and golden, her vegetables grew plump and flavorful, her orchards bore fruits so perfect they seemed like gifts from heaven itself. But Demeter's gifts went beyond mere sustenance. She also created the knowledge of agriculture, teaching mortals how to work with the earth rather than against it, how to plant and tend and harvest in ways that would enrich the soil rather than deplete it. Her lessons included not just the practical skills of farming, but also the spiritual understanding that growing food was a sacred act of cooperation between human intelligence and natural wisdom. Hestia, meanwhile, was creating the sacred spaces that would anchor every community and give it a sense of identity and belonging. She established the principle that every home should have a hearth fire that never completely died out, connecting each family to the eternal flame of love and welcome that burns at the heart of existence. She taught the arts of hospitality, cooking, and household management, not as drudgery, but as expressions of care and creativity. Her influence extended to the design of cities and towns, ensuring that every community would have a central gathering place where people could come together for celebration, decision-making, and mutual support. These civic hearths became the spiritual centers of civilization, places where the values of cooperation, generosity, and peaceful coexistence could be nurtured and renewed. As the divine siblings worked to establish their new cosmic order, they were greatly aided by the elder titans, who shared their vast experience and wisdom with enthusiastic generosity. Oceanus helped design the great water systems, while Tethys contributed her knowledge of how to make water truly life-giving rather than merely wet. Hyperion and Theia collaborated on the creation of the sun and moon, ensuring that these celestial bodies would provide not just light, but inspiration and wonder. Themis worked with all the younger gods to establish the principles of natural justice that would govern the new world. These were not harsh laws imposed from above, but rather guidelines that helped beings understand how to live in harmony with each other and with the natural world. Her influence ensured that the cosmos would be fundamentally fair, and that beings who acted with good intentions would generally experience good outcomes. Mnemosyne became the patron of all learning and artistic expression, preserving not only the factual history of creation, but also the songs, stories, and ceremonies that gave meaning to existence. She established the principle that knowledge should be shared freely, that every discovery or insight should be available to all who could benefit from it. Under her guidance, the cosmos became a vast collaborative learning environment where wisdom could accumulate and grow from generation to generation. Even Cronus found a new and fulfilling role in the transformed cosmos. He became the guardian of a special realm called the Elysian Fields, where time moved differently and beings could go to rest and reflect when they needed perspective on the great patterns of existence. This was not exile or punishment, but rather a recognition of his unique understanding of time's deeper rhythms and his gift for helping others find peace with the inevitability of change. The Cyclopes, freed from the underground workshops where they had been confined, emerged to become the master craftsmen of the new age. They created the thunderbolts that Zeus wielded, but these were not weapons of destruction. Instead, they were tools for clearing away the stagnant energy that sometimes accumulated in the atmosphere, for breaking up harmful patterns before they could become entrenched. The Cyclopes also forged Poseidon's trident, which could calm stormy seas or raise helpful winds for sailors, and Hades' helmet of invisibility, which allowed him to move unseen through the world when his duties required subtlety rather than open presence. The Hecatoncheires found their true calling as the cosmic coordinators, using their many hands and heads to manage the complex interactions between different realms and different divine beings. They became like living communication networks, able to keep track of everything that was happening throughout the cosmos and to alert the appropriate gods when their attention or intervention was needed. Their presence ensured that no crisis would go unnoticed and no need would go unmet. As this new cosmic order stabilized and began to function smoothly, it became clear that something unprecedented had been achieved. The universe had evolved from a simple hierarchical structure to a complex, collaborative system that was capable of continuous growth and adaptation. Power was distributed rather than concentrated. Decisions were made collectively rather than imposed from above, and every being had both rights and responsibilities that contributed to the greater good. The mortals who lived in this new world found themselves experiencing a different kind of existence than their golden predecessors. Their lives were not effortlessly perfect, but they were richly meaningful. They faced challenges that required them to grow and learn, but they also had the support of a cosmic order that was fundamentally benevolent and fair. They could achieve great things through their own efforts, but they were never alone in their struggles. These new mortals, who came to be called the Silver Race, lived longer and more peacefully than humans do today, but not with the thoughtless ease of the Golden Race. They had to work for their food, but the work was satisfying and the harvests were abundant. They experienced birth and death, joy and sorrow, success and failure, but all within a framework that made these experiences meaningful rather than merely random. They developed arts and sciences, philosophy and religion, systems of government and networks of trade. They learned to build beautiful cities, to create music and poetry that expressed their deepest insights, to explore the natural world and understand its patterns and processes. Most importantly, they learned to see themselves as partners with the divine forces rather than merely subjects or dependents. The relationship between mortals and immortals in this new age was characterized by mutual respect and cooperation rather than fear and subservience. The gods provided guidance and support, but they also learned from mortal creativity and adaptability. Mortals offered prayers and sacrifices, but these were expressions of gratitude and partnership rather than desperate attempts to appease potentially hostile powers. This collaborative relationship extended throughout the cosmos, creating a web of interconnection that strengthened everyone involved. The gods needed mortal worship to feel fully alive and engaged with their work, while mortals needed divine guidance to navigate the complexities of existence. Neither group was complete without the other, and both benefited from the dynamic exchange of gifts and insights. As the eons passed, this new cosmic order proved its worth by successfully adapting to challenges that would have overwhelmed the previous systems. When natural disasters occurred, the distributed leadership could respond quickly and effectively from multiple angles. When conflicts arose between different groups, the principles of justice and reconciliation could be applied with both wisdom and compassion. When new situations developed that required innovative solutions, the collaborative structure could draw on the insights of many minds rather than depending on the limited perspective of a single ruler. The cosmos had learned to think of itself not as a machine that needed to be controlled, but as a living organism that could grow and adapt and evolve. This shift in consciousness represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of existence itself, from a reality based on dominance and submission to one based on cooperation and mutual empowerment. And as this new understanding spread throughout all levels of cosmic society, from the highest gods to the humblest mortals, there was a sense of profound satisfaction and hope. The universe had finally found a form of organization that honored both the need for order and the desire for freedom, both the wisdom of experience and the energy of innovation. It was not a perfect system, for perfection would have meant stagnation, but it was a living system that could continue to grow and improve indefinitely. The great experiment in collaborative governance had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dream. The cosmos had been transformed from a realm ruled by fear into a realm inspired by love, from a hierarchy maintained by force into a community sustained by choice. The birth of the world was complete, but its growth and development would continue forever, each new day bringing fresh opportunities for discovery, creation, and the deepening of the bonds that connected all beings in the great web of existence. As the gentle rhythms of this new age settled into their eternal patterns, all the beings of the cosmos, divine and mortal, great and small, visible and hidden, found themselves cradled in a reality that was both wonderfully complex and fundamentally safe. They were part of something larger than themselves, but their individual uniqueness was cherished rather than suppressed. They faced challenges that called forth their best efforts, but they never faced them alone. The universe had learned to dream new dreams while honoring the wisdom of its past, to embrace change while maintaining continuity, to reach for the stars while keeping its feet firmly planted on the good earth that had given birth to everything. The story of creation was not finished indeed, it never would be finished, but it had reached a point of mature stability that could serve as a foundation for infinite future growth. And in this atmosphere of peaceful confidence and joyful anticipation, all existence settled into the deep, restorative sleep that comes after great labors have been completed and new possibilities have been glimpsed on the horizon. The cosmos rested in the knowledge that it had been born from chaos, not into a final, static order, but into an eternal process of creative becoming, where every ending was also a beginning, and every dream had the potential to become reality. The birth of the world was complete, and it was good, and it was only the beginning of wonders yet to be born from the inexhaustible love that lies at the heart of all existence. In this truth, the universe found its deepest peace, its greatest joy, and its eternal hope for tomorrow. And so we too can rest, knowing that we are part of this great story of creation, this ongoing adventure of consciousness, learning to know and love itself through infinite forms and expressions. We are children of the cosmos, heirs to all its wisdom and beauty, participants in its eternal dance of becoming. In this knowledge, we find our peace, our purpose, and our place in the great web of being that connects all things in love. Sleep well, dear listeners, and dream of the wonders yet to be born from the infinite creativity that flows through every moment of existence. Tomorrow brings new possibilities, new discoveries, new opportunities to participate in the great work of creation that continues always, world without end.